Hello and welcome to this new version of YAG, that is version 0.14, and it brings both new content and new features. As I want to put the new features in the tutorial playlist, I've put the content in a separate video and we'll talk only about the features in this one. A few words of caution before starting. I have added lots of new variables for the new features. Those variables are obviously not in your current saves, so it is very possible that you see strange effects when reloading your saves. The two most probable effects are that you might see a pitch black sky, which can be fixed by resetting the color of the sky here. And secondly, that the night stars might be visible even in daylight, something like that. So if it's the case, you can just enable this box here to fix the stars and you should be alright visually. Also, pretty much everything I'll say in this video is detailed in the PDF documentation that you can find by clicking the Help button on the Atmosphere window. Okay? So let's start. The first and most important news is that I have migrated to the latest version of the Unreal Engine, version 4.26. It brings improvements, optimizations, and some of the new features we'll see in this video. But as every new version of the engine, it probably also comes with new bugs and possibly regressions, so please let me know if you find anything wrong. Feature-wise, this version is mostly about lighting and visuals, plus some world organization. So let's start with that. World organization is a big word for a very simple thing, actually. All pawns can now be configured to load a map and spawn the players on a specific pawn on this target map. Nothing really new here. I mean, loading maps and teleporting to pawns could already be done manually, but this feature makes it much simpler. So the way it works is you just display the pawn window by double-clicking a pawn, and you have this new panel called Load Map. And what you want to do to configure it is to copy-paste the name of your target map and put it in this field here. Okay, and if any, you could also put the ID of the target pawn. Here we don't have any, so I'm going to load this map here. So to show you how it works, I have prepared three small maps called World Maps, World Forest, and World Village. And the world map here is sort of the central map of our world, okay, which contains for the moment just a few pawns pointing toward the other map. So what we would have to do is to double click any pawn here, and you can see that this pawn is configured to send us to the world village, to the entrance of the world village specifically. So I'm going third person here to show you where we arrive more precisely, and then I activate the teleport, and then here we are in the village, okay, on the pawn that is called entrance, and that is actually crystal. Okay. From here we can have our adventure, and when it's done we could go back to go back here to the world map, okay, or we can go directly to the world forest, for example, which is basically the same map with trees instead of houses. And you can see that from here we could go back to the village or go back to the world map. So all in all, you can put multiple entrances and multiple exits in your maps, so you can organize your maps, with, for example, the south exit of a map corresponding to the north entrance of another map, or you can have a forest with multiple entries, north, south, east, west, and so on and so on and so on. So very easy to do, and very comfortable, I think, for the dungeon master to organize multiple maps into a single coherent world. By the way, if you don't specify any target map, but just a target ID, then you can use those pawns as teleport device. All right, so for example, here this crystal is called crystal 1 and it is pointing to crystal 2. So if I activate it, I will be teleported to the second crystal here. And this one, as you can see, is crystal 2 obviously, and it points to crystal 1. So if I activate it, I go back to crystal 1. So you can use them for as teleport device in a single map or to change map as you will. So nothing really new here, but it's kind of much more practical. Next, we have what I think is the most useful feature in the visual department in this version. I'm going to load the map I used for testing to show you that. So it's called torch tuning here. That's the one. So all lights are now customizable with 5 options. So I'm going to show you that with this pawn here. So again, it all happens by double-clicking the pawn to display the pawn properties window. And you can see that we have a new panel called Lights, which contains 5 options. All right, so there is also an option to switch lights on and off, obviously. And then 3 of those options are pretty obvious. We can change the intensity of the light. Okay, then we can change its radius. And we can obviously change if its color if we need to. Okay. The 2 other options require a bit more explanation. So this one here represents how fast the light will fade away from its source. 2 is the default setting and gives a rather realistic looking light. An interesting value here would be 0. In that case, the light doesn't fade and just stops at its limit radius. So this gives a very unrealistic lighting, of course, but it can be interesting gameplay-wise because it shows the exact sight distance for the character. So if knowing exactly the sight distance of a character is more important to you than realism, then this is a parameter to keep in mind. Okay, the distance is expressed in meters. So here we have a torch lighting 7 meters away, 4 meters away, and so on and so on. Okay. The last parameter here sets the radius of the light source, and we'll have a closer look at the end of this video because I need to introduce another feature to show you how this one really works. Okay. So next we have a more realistic model for the atmosphere. The engine is now computing, so let me show you the atmosphere widget here. The engine is now computing the colors of the atmosphere according to the laws of physics by simulating 3 effects here. The one for the color of the sun and sky, one for the atmospheric fog, and one to darken the sky, the absorption. So I'm going to show you that obviously by putting back a bit of light. So this gives us lots of options to create a more versatile and realistic looking sky, because for each of those 3 systems we can choose an intensity and a color. So the default values correspond to the Earth atmosphere, obviously, as you can see, but we can easily go alien by setting, for example, a purple sky. So let's do that. Let's go full purple here and apply, and you can see that we get a purple sky. You can see that all the colors of the atmosphere are computed automatically. We are going to look at the east here, and let's go for sunrise. Okay, and you can see that with that purple sky, it gives us a green sunrise. You can also note that the stars are continuously fading and they are full bright during the night. Okay, so this gives, let's go back to 6, and we have a nice sunrise here, alien sunrise, and of course we could have Earth's color here. So as you can see, the as the sun rises and sets, the night sky is slowly fading, but you can enable or disable this feature by checking this box that we have seen at the beginning of the video. So by default, the luminance of the stars is computed automatically, but you can disable it to force the sky to be always visible, which can be useful or on alien worlds, or if you want a spectacular sky in bright daylight, or if you want a thinner atmosphere. So let's go back to our purple, maybe an orange sky here, something like that. Okay, so I force the stars to be always visible, and you can see that I could get a thinner atmosphere by putting a smaller number here, so that the sky might be a bit more visible. And you can see that we have a full sun here, that we have the sky, the stars visible, and that we have a very nice gradient atmosphere all around. Okay, so if you want to go for alien sky, this is very easy to do now. Next, we have an option which is a bit of a gadget in my opinion, but as it was available in the new version of the engine, I thought it wouldn't hurt to have it in YAG. So we now have volumetric clouds in YAG. As always, there are tons of options and parameters for this feature in the engine, but I prefer to keep it simple as possible, because because it's not an important feature in my opinion. So we only have three parameters here. The altitude, which is expressed in kilometers, and which, by the way, can be negative. So if you want to make a city, if you want to make a city above the sky. So let's go back to the sunrise because it's so much more beautiful with those colors. Okay, so if you want to make a city above the sky, you can do that very easily. So that's the first parameter. The second parameter gives the thickness of the cloud layer. So again, if you put something bigger, it sort of drives the density of the clouds. Okay, let's come back to one here. And finally, the last parameter here is giving the shape of the clouds, and is given by simple presets. Okay, so you just change the shape of your clouds by clicking any button, and you're done. Okay. Finally, the last new feature is the most exotic one, I guess. We can now enable ray tracing in YAG. So I have to say a few words of caution about that one. It's a very young technology in real-time graphics and in the Unreal Engine, so it has a few drawbacks. You'll find more detail in the PDF document that we saw at the beginning of this video, but long story short, you need an RTX capable card with up-to-date drivers. Also, it will not work properly in every situation, and finally, it will kill your performance. So is it worth it? Yes, most definitely yes, because although it strongly depends on what you put on your screen, when it works well, it gives absolutely amazing results and will greatly improve your image quality up to an almost realistic point sometimes. So let me load the map that I have prepared to show you that. It's called ray tracing. And let's go to this view here that I have prepared. So you can say that the image we have looks generally okay. It's what we always had in YAG, and it looks good, nothing to say about that. But if we look a bit more carefully, we can spot a few problems though. First, the shadows, as you can see, they are pitch black and they are very sharp, which is not very convincing. The ceiling here is very dark because no direct light is reaching it. And also the ambient occlusion around the columns is quite poor, giving a sort of flat impression. We don't get much volume here. So let's turn on the full ray tracing here. Okay, so you click full and then you apply. And as you can see, the room instantly comes to life. shadows are soft and realistic. The ceiling, sorry, is lit by indirect light rays bouncing everywhere, so it is actually visible now. The ambient occlusion um, is much better looking on the edges of the columns, and we get a much nicer sense of volumes. So the overall impression is obviously much better, but it comes to a very heavy price. First, you can see that we lost the fire effects. There is no fire on the torch and no in the dungeon lights as well. Okay, so we lost the fire effects, and that's because the fully enabled ray tracing doesn't currently support any special effects, so no fire and no spells. That are huge drawbacks. And second, it kills the performance. So let's disable it. It's already done, and show our FPS here, so the number of frames per second. We currently run at 60 plus with no problem on that scene. Now look what happens when I enable the full ray tracing. Okay, I go from 60 plus to 10, which is an absolute catastrophe, obviously. So it looks super pretty and it would make amazing screenshot, but it's basically unusable in real time. So I spent quite some time fiddling around with parameters and came up with an intermediate solution where ray tracing is enabled but scaled down to remain usable in real time at the cost of quality, of course. So this is the optimized options that we have here. As you can see, it's a bit more noisy on specific places on the screen, but it still looks quite pretty and runs at about 30 frames per second, which is all right. And as a bonus, we get the flames back, as you can see. So if you have an RTX card and want a more realistic lighting without sacrificing too much performance, that would be the way to go. Oh, by the way, let me show you the usage of that last light parameter that we talked earlier about. So that one, it's the source radius. So if you imagine a light bulb, that would be the radius of the light bulb. It's expressed in meters. So here we have a light bulb, a source radius of 5 centimeters. So the larger it is, the softer the shadow will be. So if I put it to 0, you can see that I get, 0 here. You can see that I get a very sharp and unrealistic shadow. And if I put a larger value, I will get a very blurry shadow. Okay, so again, the default is 0.05, which corresponds to 5 centimeters. And again, don't forget that this works only when the ray tracing is enabled to allow the computation of ray traced soft shadow. All right. If I disable the ray tracing, then the shadow are not computed with that, so they will always be like that. So here we are. All in all, this option is amazing in my opinion. It obviously represents the future. Absolutely no doubt about that. But at the time of this recording in April 2021, it is still in its infancy and should be considered very, very experimental in YAG. Okay. All right, so sorry about the quite long video here. Lots of things to say in that one. I still hope you found it interesting, and if it's the case, then see you in the next with pleasure. Thank you very much, and bye.